Vextar stood at the observation deck of the luxury cruise ship Stellar Majesty, his 4 eyes scanning the crowd with the practiced patience of an apex predator. At 7 feet tall, with razor-sharp claws and teeth that could punch through titanium plating, he was what the Korthak species called a perfect killing machine. The other passengers called him that terrifying guy we really hope doesn't sit near us at dinner. The ship was packed with the usual mix of wealthy tourists from across the galaxy, all here to enjoy a pleasant 3-week cruise through the scenic Andromeda sector. Perfect hunting grounds, really. Vextar had booked this particular cruise specifically because of its reputation for attracting soft, pampered prey who had never seen real violence outside of holographic entertainment. His gaze swept over a group of fliblins near the pool deck, their jellyfish-like bodies wobbling as they sipped fruity drinks through specialized straws. Too easy, and honestly, where was the sport in hunting something that was already 90% water? Plus, they tasted like disappointment and regret. A cluster of Zepians caught his attention next, their crystalline forms glittering in the artificial sunlight. Now those might provide some challenge, given their ability to refract light and create illusions. But Vextar had hunted their kind before, and once you figured out the pattern of their light tricks, they were just very expensive paperweights, with attitude problems. He flexed his claws unconsciously, feeling the familiar thrill of the hunt beginning to build in his chest. The Korthak had been apex predators for over 10,000 years, and Vextar came from a particularly distinguished lineage of killers. His great-grandfather had single-handedly wiped out an entire species of warrior poets, though admittedly they had been terrible at both poetry and warfare. The ship's artificial gravity hummed beneath his feet as he continued his survey. This was always his favorite part, the selection process. Any fool could kill randomly, but it took true artistry to choose the perfect prey. Someone challenging enough to make the hunt interesting, but not so dangerous as to actually pose a threat to someone of his caliber. Vextar's mandibles clicked in anticipation. By the time this cruise was over, he would have added another trophy to his collection, and another story to tell at the predator bars back home. The galaxy was full of species who thought they were tough, but when it came down to it, there was always a bigger fish. And Vextar was definitely the biggest fish on this particular ship. Or so he thought. That's when Vextar spotted him. Sitting alone at a corner table on the promenade deck was what appeared to be the most pathetic excuse for a sentient being Vextar had ever laid eyes on. The creature was small, maybe 5.5 feet tall, with no visible natural weapons. No claws, no fangs, no armored plating, no poisonous spines, just soft pink skin that looked like it would tear if you sneezed on it too hard. The being was calmly reading a book, completely oblivious to the deadly predator studying him from across the deck. Vextar's 4 eyes focused on the book's title, and he had to suppress a laugh. 101 Ways to MacGyver Your Way Out of Alien Abduction. How adorable. This little creature was so weak and defenseless that it actually needed a self-help book to survive. Perfect. Vextar began his approach, moving with the fluid grace of a natural hunter. This would be almost too easy, but sometimes you needed an appetizer before the main course. He'd take this pathetic little thing quickly and quietly, then move on to something more challenging. As he drew closer, Vextar noticed the creature had what appeared to be a small patch of fur on its upper lip and chin. Some kind of primitive display feature, perhaps? The being was wearing simple clothing in blues and grays, nothing that suggested wealth or importance. Definitely a bottom-feeder species. Well, hello there, big guy. Vextar nearly jumped out of his exoskeleton. The creature was looking directly at him with bright, curious eyes, grinning like they were old friends. This was not how prey was supposed to behave. Prey was supposed to cower or run, or at least have the common decency to look appropriately terrified. "I'm Jake," the creature continued cheerfully, marking his page with a finger. "You must be one of those Korthak folks I've heard about. Wow, you're even more impressive in person. Those claws are absolutely beautiful. Are they naturally that sharp, or do you have to maintain them?" Vextar's brain stuttered. In all his years of hunting, no prey had ever complimented his claws. Most beings took one look at them and started planning their last will and testament. Vextar began, then stopped. This was not going according to plan. "Oh, you've got to try these," Jake said, pulling out a small container from his bag. "They're called trail mix. Nuts, dried fruit, some chocolate bits. I brought way too much for the cruise. Want some?" And just like that, the apex predator found himself being offered snacks by his intended victim. This was either going to be the easiest hunt of his career, or something had gone terribly, terribly wrong. Before Vexstar could process what was happening, a gelatinous blob of anxiety rolled up to their table. Quirk, one of the fliblins from the pool deck, was practically vibrating with nervous energy, his translucent body rippling like disturbed water. "Vexstar, buddy, can I talk to you for a second?" Quirk's voice was high-pitched and shaky. "Privately?" Jake looked up from his trail mix. "Oh, don't mind me. I'll just be here reading about improvised weapons made from common household items. Chapter 7 is fascinating." Quirk's entire body went pale, which for a fliblin meant he was roughly the color of week-old milk. He grabbed Vexter's arm with a tentacle and dragged him several feet away. "Are you completely insane?" Quirk whispered, his voice barely audible. "That's a human." "So?" Vextor shrugged. "It's small and weak. Perfect prey." "Small and weak." Quirk's voice cracked. "Do you know what humans did in the Centauri conflicts? They turned a mining operation into a military fortress using nothing but spare parts and pure spite. They domesticated creatures that were literally designed to be undomesticatable. They took one look at the most dangerous predator in their home system and decided to keep it as a pet." "You're being ridiculous," Vextar said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Am I? Tell me, what's the first rule of galactic survival?" "Don't anger anything with more teeth than you have." "No, you moron. Never, ever mess with a species that invented nuclear weapons and then immediately used them on themselves. That's a level of crazy you don't want to engage with." Before Vextar could respond, Lord Pumpus materialized beside them in a swirl of crystalline arrogance. The Zephyrian prismatic body caught the light and threw rainbows across the deck, like a very pretentious disco ball. "Are we discussing the human?" Lord Pompous asked in his insufferably cultured accent. "I do hope you're not planning anything foolish, dear Vextar. Humans have a rather unfortunate reputation for weaponizing literally everything, including friendship." "Friendship?" Vextar scoffed. "How is friendship a weapon?" "Well," Lord Pompous said with the air of someone about to deliver a particularly juicy piece of gossip, "there was that incident on Kepler Station where a human befriended a Vorthan war chief. By the end of the week, the human had somehow convinced the entire Vorthan fleet to switch sides in a galactic conflict. The human claimed it was just good conversation over drinks." Quirk nodded vigorously. "And don't get me started on their military tactics. They have something called human wave attacks, where they just keep coming at you until you run out of ammunition, or the will to live. Sometimes both. Plus," Lord Pompous added, "they're persistence hunters. They don't have to be faster than you, they just have to be more stubborn. And trust me, nothing in the galaxy is more stubborn than a human with a goal." Vextar looked back at Jake, who was still reading his book and occasionally munching on trail mix. The human looked about as threatening as a particularly docile houseplant. "You're both paranoid," Vextar said, but even he could hear the uncertainty creeping into his voice. Against his better judgment, and ignoring the increasingly frantic gestures from Quark and Lord Pompous, Vextar returned to Jake's table. The human looked up with that same unsettling friendly smile. "Sorry about that," Jake said, closing his book. "Your friends seemed a bit worried about something. Everything okay?" "They're not my friends," Vextar replied, settling into the chair across from Jake. "They're just concerned about interspecies relations." "Oh, that's nice of them. I love meeting new people, or, well, new beings, I guess. This is actually my first big galactic cruise. I'm more of an outdoorsy type usually." "Outdoorsy?" Vextar asked, despite himself. "Yeah, you know, hiking, camping, rock climbing, base jumping, shark diving, bear wrestling, that sort of thing." Jake said this with the same casual tone most people use to discuss the weather. "I've been trying to get into more extreme sports lately. Last month I went alligator wrestling down in the Florida swamps. Man, those things have some serious bite strength." Vextar's claws involuntarily extended slightly. "You wrestle alligators?" "Well, not professionally or anything, it's just a hobby. Though I did place third in the regional championships. Lost to this guy who had been doing it for like 40 years. Respect to the veterans, you know." "Right," Vextar said slowly. "And these alligators, they're dangerous predators on your world?" "Oh, absolutely. Apex predators, really. Been around since the dinosaurs. They can death roll and everything. Super cool animals. I've got some pictures if you want to see." Before Vextar could process what was happening, Jake had pulled out a small device and was scrolling through images. The first photo showed Jake with his arm around something that looked like a living nightmare with teeth. Both Jake and the creature appeared to be smiling? "That's Snappy," Jake said fondly. "He's a rescue. Lost his left leg in a boat propeller accident, so the wildlife preserve couldn't release him back into the wild. I volunteer there on weekends. Snappy's actually pretty gentle once you get to know him. The next photo was Jake riding on the back of what appeared to be a massive, fur-covered death machine, with claws the size of dinner plates. That's from my trip to Alaska. Kodiak bear, about 800 pounds. His name is Mr. Waffles. I know. I didn't name him. The park rangers have a weird sense of humor. Vexstar stared at the image. The bear looked like it could tear through starship hull plating, and Jake was casually sitting on its back like they were old drinking buddies. You befriended a Kodiak bear? Well, I mean, befriended might be strong. We have an understanding. I bring him salmon, he doesn't eat my face. It's a pretty good arrangement. Jake swiped to the next photo, which showed him standing next to a sleek black and white creature in what appeared to be an ocean setting. That's Keller. He's an orca, 26 feet long, about 6 tons, smartest hunter in Earth's oceans. We met when I was doing some underwater photography work. He kept following me around, so I started bringing him treats. Now, whenever I'm in the area, he shows up. Sometimes he brings his family. His family, Vexstar repeated weakly. Yeah, about 12 other orcas. They're pack hunters, you know. Incredibly sophisticated hunting techniques. They can beach themselves to catch prey, work together to create waves, even launch seals 30 feet in the air just for fun. Absolutely brilliant animals. Vexter was beginning to understand why Quirk had looked so terrified. This wasn't just a small, weak creature. This was a being that looked at apex predators and thought, you know what? We should be friends. Of course, Jake continued, completely oblivious to Vextro's growing horror. Most of my hobbies are pretty tame compared to my day job. Your day job? Vexstar's voice was barely a whisper. Yeah, I work for the Terran Diplomatic Corps. You know, helping establish peaceful relations with new species we encounter. It's really rewarding work. We specialize in cultural exchange and conflict resolution. Something about the way Jake said conflict resolution made Vexstar's survival instincts start screaming. The Terran Diplomatic Corps was legendary throughout the galaxy, though not exactly for their diplomacy. They were the ones who had peacefully negotiated the surrender of the Vegan Empire by parking a fleet of human dreadnoughts in their capital system and asking very politely if they'd like to discuss terms. So you're military, Vexstar said. Oh, not really. I mean, I have some training, but mostly I just talk to people. Well, beings. You know what I mean. Though I did do a stint with the Marines before I got into diplomatic work. Semper Fi and all that. Vexstar's blood ran cold. He'd heard stories about human Marines. Entire star systems had surrendered rather than face them in combat. The Marines, he repeated. Yeah, good times. Really builds character. Plus you learn a lot of useful skills. How to make weapons out of anything, how to survive in hostile environments, how to turn everyday objects into tactical advantages. Actually, that's how I got interested in this book. Jake held up 101 ways to MacGyver your way out of alien abduction. Though honestly, most of this stuff is pretty basic. Like, who doesn't know how to make a plasma cutter out of a toothbrush and a power cell? At that moment, Vexstar realized he had made a terrible, terrible mistake. He wasn't looking at prey. He was looking at the most dangerous predator in the galaxy, and it was offering him trail mix. You know what? Jake said, leaning back in his chair with an expression of genuine excitement. We should totally hang out more during this cruise. I've been looking for someone to do some activities with. Most of the other passengers seem kind of, I don't know, skittish? But you look like you'd be up for some fun. Vexstar's throat made a sound that was supposed to be words but came out more like a deflating balloon. Fun? Yeah. I was thinking we could hit the ship's combat simulation deck. They've got this amazing setup where you can hunt holographic creatures from different worlds. I've been dying to try it, but it's designed for team play, 2-person minimum. The word hunt sent a chill down Vexter's spine. When humans talked about hunting, it usually involved tactics that would make seasoned warriors weep into their ration packs. Or, Jake continued, his eyes lighting up like a child on Christmas morning, we could check out the zero-gravity sports complex. I've been wanting to try 3-dimensional combat maneuvers. Back on Earth, we call it aerial dogfighting, but I bet it's even more fun when you can move in all directions at once. Combat maneuvers? Vexstar managed to squeak out. Oh, it's fantastic. See, the key to 3-dimensional combat is understanding that your enemy expects you to think in terms of up and down, but in 0G, those concepts become meaningless. You can attack from any angle, use momentum to your advantage, turn your opponent's strength against them. It's all about persistence and adaptability. Vexstar was beginning to understand something truly terrifying about humans. They didn't just fight to survive, they fought for entertainment. They had turned warfare into recreation. The really cool thing about persistence hunting, Jake went on, apparently not noticing that Vexter was slowly backing away from the table, is that it doesn't matter if your prey is faster or stronger than you. All that matters is that you don't give up, ever. You just keep coming, and coming, and coming. Eventually your prey gets tired, makes a mistake, or just gives up entirely. Gives up entirely, Vexter repeated in a voice that sounded like it was coming from someone else's throat. Yeah, it's actually pretty effective. We humans aren't the fastest or strongest species, but we're stubborn as hell. Plus, we're really good at adapting. You know how they say, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail? Well, humans are the species that looks at everything and thinks, how can I turn this into a hammer? Jake picked up a decorative napkin from the table and began folding it absent-mindedly. Within seconds, he had somehow transformed it into what appeared to be a small, sharp projectile. See? Napkin dart. Probably wouldn't kill you, but it would definitely sting. And if you put the right spin on it, you could take out someone's eye from across the room. It's all about understanding the physics of the situation and working with what you have. Vextar watched in horror as Jake casually demonstrated the aerodynamics of his improvised weapon by tossing it at a nearby waste receptacle. It hit dead center with a satisfying thunk. Of course, that's just basic stuff. Back in my Marine days, we had this instructor who could kill a man with a plastic spoon. Not because the spoon was sharp, mind you, but because he understood leverage and pressure points. Give a human the right knowledge and enough motivation, and they can weaponize literally anything. Anything? Vextar's voice was barely a whisper. Oh, absolutely. I once saw a guy take down an entire squad of hostile combatants using nothing but a roll of duct tape and a really bad attitude. Humans are basically the galaxy's most dangerous MacGyver species. We see a problem, we find a solution, and we don't really care if that solution is technically impossible or violates several laws of physics. Jake paused to take a sip of his drink, which Vextar now realized was probably some kind of human combat stimulant disguised as a fruity beverage. That's actually why I love working in the diplomatic corps, Jake continued. People think diplomacy is all about talking and compromise, but really, it's about understanding your opposition and finding creative solutions to complex problems. Sometimes the most peaceful resolution is to make sure everyone understands exactly how much they don't want to fight you. Don't want to fight you, Vextar repeated, his voice getting higher with each word. Right, like take the situation with the Andromedan Trade Alliance last year. They were being really aggressive about expanding into human space, making all sorts of threats. So we sent a diplomatic mission to their capital. Just one ship, small crew, totally peaceful. Jake's smile took on a quality that made Vextra's survival instincts scream louder than a fire alarm in an ammunition depot. The ship was called the Friendship. Cute name, right? What the Andromedans didn't know was that the Friendship was actually a prototype stealth vessel with enough firepower to crack a moon in half. We didn't threaten them or anything, we just showed up. Had some tea, talked about the weather, mentioned how much we appreciated their beautiful capital city and how terrible it would be if anything ever happened to it. And they backed down? Vextar asked, though he already knew the answer. Babels backed down. Turned out they weren't nearly as eager to fight once they realized that humans consider mutually assured destruction to be a perfectly reasonable negotiating tactic. We're funny that way. We'll be your best friend in the galaxy. But if you threaten us or our friends, we'll show you exactly why we're the only species that ever looked at nuclear weapons and thought, hey, let's make bigger ones. At that moment, Vextar noticed something that made his blood freeze in his veins. Other passengers were leaving the area. Not just moving away, but actively avoiding the entire section of the deck where he and Jake were sitting. A group of Rigelian traders had taken one look at them and immediately changed course. A cluster of Centauri diplomats had suddenly remembered urgent business elsewhere. Even the service staff seemed to be giving them a wide berth. Jake, Vextar said carefully, are you aware that everyone seems to be avoiding us? Jake looked around and chuckled. Oh, that. Yeah, that happens sometimes. Humans have kind of a reputation in certain circles. Most species are cool with us, but some of the more predatory types tend to get nervous when they realize what we are. Who are you? Vextar's voice cracked. Apex predators, who evolved from prey animals. We're basically the galaxy's ultimate contradiction. We look harmless, we act friendly, we offer to share our snacks, but deep down, we're the species that climbed to the top of the food chain on a planet that was actively trying to kill us every single day. Jake leaned forward conspiratorially. Between you and me, I think that's what really scares people. It's not that we're aggressive or violent, it's that we're nice. We genuinely want to be friends with everyone. But if you threaten us or our friends, we'll end you with a smile on our faces and offer to help your next of kin with the funeral arrangements. Vextar realized with the crystal clarity that comes with absolute terror that he had gone from hunter to hunted without even realizing it. The human hadn't threatened him, hadn't shown any aggression, hadn't even raised his voice. He had simply existed in Jake's presence long enough to understand the fundamental truth about humanity. They weren't just apex predators. They were apex predators who had weaponized friendship itself. And Jake had already decided they were friends. Vextar attempted what he hoped would be a casual retreat, slowly pushing his chair back from the table. Well, Jake, this has been enlightening, but I should probably get back to my cabin and... Oh, come on! Jake's face lit up with genuine disappointment. The cruise is just getting started. We've got 3 whole weeks to hang out. I've already planned out some awesome activities for us. Us? Vextar's voice came out as a strangled whisper. Yeah, buddy. I mean, what are the odds? I come on this cruise hoping to meet some interesting people, and I end up sitting next to one of the galaxy's most renowned apex predators. This is like Christmas morning and my birthday rolled into one. Jake pulled out what appeared to be a small planning device and began scrolling through it enthusiastically. Okay, so tomorrow we've got the combat simulation deck from 10 to noon. Then I thought we could hit the zero-gravity sports complex. Oh, and there's a cultural exchange dinner where I can introduce you to some traditional human foods. Ever had Carolina Reaper peppers? They're fantastic. We bred them specifically to be as painful as possible to eat. You bred food to cause pain. Vextar felt his survival instincts giving up and writing their resignation letters. Oh, absolutely. Humans love that stuff. We're the only species that looks at capsaicin, a literal plant defense mechanism designed to prevent consumption, and thinks, let's make this even stronger and put it on everything. We've turned self-inflicted suffering into a competitive sport. Jake continued scrolling through his plans with the focused intensity of a military strategist. Then on Wednesday there's that shore excursion to the Kepler mining colony. I heard they've got some really dangerous wildlife there, something called razor wolves that hunt in packs and can supposedly chew through titanium armor. That sounds fun, right? Fun, Vextar repeated, his voice completely devoid of any emotion except existential dread. And get this, Friday night is Predator and Prey-themed costume party. I was thinking we could go as a team. You're already perfectly dressed as a predator and I could go as prey. Then we could really blow everyone's minds when they realize we've got it backwards. Vextar tried to stand up, but his legs seemed to have forgotten how to function. Jake, I appreciate the offer, but I really should... Oh, and I almost forgot! Jake jumped up with the enthusiasm of someone who had just remembered where they left a winning lottery ticket. There's a species exchange program where we can teach each other about our homeworlds. I brought a whole presentation about Earth's ecosystem. Did you know we share our planet with something called honey badgers? They're these small, furry creatures that are basically concentrated rage and poor life choices. They'll fight anything, including animals 50 times their size, and they literally do not care if they die in the process. Concentrated rage and poor life choices, Vextar muttered, wondering if Jake was actually describing honey badgers or humans in general. Plus, I've got videos of Australian wildlife, which is basically what happens when evolution decides to run a beta test on biological warfare. Everything there is either venomous, poisonous, or has figured out how to be both simultaneously. And humans decided to colonize it anyway, because apparently we looked at a continent covered in death incarnate and thought perfect vacation spot. Jake was now pacing excitedly, gesturing with his hands as he spoke. Oh, and we could do some team-building exercises. I know this great one, where we're handcuffed together and have to escape from a locked room using only improvised tools. It's fantastic for building trust and testing creative problem-solving skills. Handcuffed together, Vextar repeated, realizing that his fate was sealed. He was going to spend the next 3 weeks as the unwilling best friend of the most dangerous being in the galaxy. This is going to be the best cruise ever, Jake declared, clapping his hands together. I can already tell we're going to be great friends. You seem like the kind of guy who appreciates a good challenge. Vextar managed to stand up on shaking legs. I need to send a message to my home world. Oh, sure thing. Family check-in, right? That's so sweet. Family is important. Hey, you should invite them to visit Earth sometime. We love having guests, and I bet they'd get a kick out of meeting some of our local wildlife. As Vextar stumbled away from the table, he could hear Jake calling after him cheerfully. Don't forget, combat simulation deck tomorrow at 10. This is going to be so much fun. Back in his cabin, Vextar sat down at his communication terminal with shaking claws and began composing a message to the Korthak High Command. To the Apex Predator Council of the Korthak Hegemony, he he began, his voice barely steady. I am writing to provide an urgent update to our species threat assessment database regarding the beings known as humans. He paused, trying to figure out how to explain what he had just experienced. Previous intelligence reports have classified humans as a minor threat, rating them as diplomatically annoying but militarily manageable. This assessment is catastrophically incorrect. Humans are not just apex predators. They are apex predators who have evolved beyond the need for traditional, predatory behavior. Vextar's claws clicked against the terminal keys as he continued typing. They do not hunt for food or territory. They hunt for entertainment. They do not kill for survival. They kill for peace. They have weaponized friendship, turned suffering into recreation, and somehow convinced the galaxy that they are the reasonable ones. He stopped typing and stared at the screen, trying to process everything that had just happened. Recommendation: avoid humans at all costs. If contact cannot be avoided, do not, under any circumstances, accept their offers of friendship. I repeat, do not accept their friendship. It is not friendship as we understand it. It is adoption. And once a human has adopted you, you belong to them forever. Vextar was about to send the message when his door chimed. He opened it to find Jake standing in the hallway, holding a plate of what appeared to be small, colorful confections. Hey buddy, I brought you some human cookies as a friendship gift. They're chocolate chip. Oh, and I talked to the activities director about getting us matching t-shirts for tomorrow's combat simulation. I hope you like the color blue. As Jake handed him the plate of cookies, Vextar realized with horrible clarity that his message to the High Command was already too late. He had been adopted by a human, and his fate was sealed. Thanks, Jake, he said weakly, accepting the cookies. No problem, friend. See you tomorrow at 10. We're going to have such an adventure. As Jake walked away, humming what sounded like a human war chant, Vextar closed his door and added one final line to his message. Send help. Or don't. I don't think it would matter at this point. And somewhere in the depths of space, the most feared predator in the Korthak hegemony sat in his luxury cabin, eating chocolate chip cookies and wondering how exactly he had become the pet of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The worst part was, the cookies were actually pretty good.